Before skyscrapers, before empires of steel and gunpowder, before the modern world drew its borders on a map, there was a land of endless grass and wind, the Eurasian steppe, a place of brutal cold, scorching summers, and constant violence. It was here, in this forgotten corner of the world, that the greatest empire in human history would be born. In the 12th century, the steppe was not one people, it was dozens, tribes of nomadic warriors who raided, enslaved, and slaughtered each other in an endless cycle of revenge. There was no peace, no unity, only survival. The strong took from the weak, and the weak prayed they would survive until morning. Into this chaos, a child was born around 1162 AD. His name was Temüjin. His life began in hardship and never let up. At 9 years old, his father was poisoned by rival tribesmen. His family was abandoned on the steppe, left to starve, left to die. Most children in his position would not have survived. Temüjin was not most children. As a teenager, he was captured and enslaved, forced to wear a heavy wooden collar, a kang, around his neck as a mark of total submission. He escaped. He regrouped, and with every blow fate dealt him, something hardened inside Temüjin, something that could not be broken. He began to build, quietly, carefully, alliance by alliance. By 1206, Temüjin had done what no one thought possible. He had united the warring tribes of the Mongolian steppe under a single banner. At a great gathering called the Kurultai, thousands of warriors and tribal leaders assembled on the open plain. They raised their voices as one, and they gave him a new name, Genghis Khan, the universal ruler. Genghis Khan was now the master of the steppe. But he was not satisfied with the steppe. He looked outward, at the rich cities beyond the horizon, at kingdoms bloated with wealth and slow with complacency. And he began to plan. His ambition was not to raid, it was not to plunder, it was to conquer everything. What Genghis Khan unleashed was not just an army. It was a war machine of terrifying sophistication. His cavalry could cover 80 miles in a single day, faster than any enemy could send a warning. Soldiers were reorganized into units of 10, 100, 1,000, 10,000. A decimal system that cut across tribal loyalties and forged a single, unified fighting force. The Mongols mastered siege warfare with shocking speed. They recruited Chinese engineers, Persian architects, and captured experts from every city they took. Catapults, battering rams, fire weapons, nothing was beyond them. Cities that had stood for centuries behind thick stone walls found those walls meant nothing when the Mongols arrived. But the Mongols' most powerful weapon was fear itself. Before every campaign, envoys were sent ahead with a simple message: surrender now, and your city will be spared. Your people will live. Resist, and we will leave nothing standing. Many cities, entire kingdoms, surrendered without a single arrow being fired. Those that didn't would soon wish they had. In 1219, the Sultan of the Khwarezmian Empire made a fatal mistake. He executed Genghis Khan's trade envoys, a direct act of war. The Khan's response was merciless. A force of over 100,000 warriors swept into the empire like a storm. Samarkand, one of the greatest cities on the Silk Road, a jewel of the ancient world, was sacked and burned within days. The destruction was almost incomprehensible. In Nishapur, it is said the Mongols stacked the skulls of the dead into great pyramids, men, women, and children separated into different piles. Entire cities were simply erased. Populations that had existed for thousands of years were gone. Historians estimate that the Mongol campaigns in Central Asia killed millions. Some regions did not recover for 200 years. The sons and generals of Genghis Khan pushed further west, into Russia, where they crushed every prince who stood against them, into Poland and Hungary, where European knights, the finest warriors the continent could offer, were slaughtered at the Battle of Legnica in 1241. Western Europe had no answer. Monks wrote in their chronicles that the end of days had come. And then, miraculously, the Mongols stopped. The great Khan Ögedei had died back in Mongolia, and the generals were summoned home to choose a new ruler. Europe exhaled. It had been saved, not by its own armies, not by its own walls or prayers, but by the death of a man thousands of miles away. It would never forget how close it had come to oblivion. And then, miraculously, the Mongols stopped. The great Khan Ögedei had died back in Mongolia, and the generals were summoned home to choose a new ruler. Europe exhaled. It had been saved, not by its own armies, not by its own walls or prayers, but by the death of a man thousands of miles away. It would never forget how close it had come to oblivion. The fall of Baghdad was one of the most catastrophic moments in the history of human civilization. The House of Wisdom, a legendary library and center of learning that had preserved and advanced the knowledge of the ancient world for centuries, was destroyed. Books by the thousands were thrown into the Tigris River. It is said the waters ran black with ink for days. Hulagu Khan rode through the ruins of what had been the greatest city in the world. The Caliph, the spiritual leader of millions, was executed. The city that had stood for 5 centuries was rubble and ash. The Mongol Empire had reached its terrible peak. It now stretched from the Pacific coast of China to the borders of Egypt and Poland. No empire in history had ever been larger. But here is where the story turns. The very size of the empire was its greatest weakness. Governing 24 million square kilometers from a single center was impossible. After Genghis Khan's death, the empire was divided among his heirs into 4 great khanates: the Golden Horde in Russia, the Ilkhanate in Persia, the Chagatai Khanate in Central Asia, and the Yuan dynasty in China. These khanates were supposed to remain loyal to a single great Khan. They did not. The Mongols who ruled Persia converted to Islam. Those in China became Chinese emperors in all but name. Cousins fought cousins. Khanate warred against Khanate. The unity that had made the Mongols unstoppable was gone, and into this weakness crept something far worse than any army: the Black Death. Historians now believe the bubonic plague originated in the rodent populations of Central Asia, the very heartland of the Mongol world. It spread along the Silk Road trade routes that the Mongols had opened and protected, the same roads that had carried silk, spices, gold, and ideas now carried death. By the mid-14th century, a third of Europe was dead. The Khanates were devastated. The Yuan dynasty in China was the first great Khanate to collapse. Weakened by floods, famine, plague, and relentless peasant uprisings, the Mongol rulers lost their grip. In 1368, a rebel leader named Zhu Yuanzhang, the son of a peasant farmer, led the Ming dynasty to victory. The Mongols were driven out of Beijing, back across the Gobi Desert, back to the steppe from which they had come. The last Mongol Khan fled with his exhausted army into the desert. The great capital of Khan Balik, the city that Marco Polo had described as the most magnificent on earth, was gone. In Russia, the Golden Horde shattered into smaller successor states, eventually swallowed by the rising power of Muscovy. The Timurid successor states in Central Asia dissolved in the 16th century. The empire was finished. And yet, what the Mongols left behind cannot be ignored. For all their destruction, they also connected the world. The Pax Mongolica, the Mongol peace, allowed merchants, diplomats, and scholars to travel safely from China to Europe for the first time in history. The fall of Baghdad pushed Islamic scholars westward, helping spark the Renaissance. The weakness of Mongol Russia gave rise to the state that would become modern Russia. The Mongol Empire lasted less than 200 years. It rose from nothing, from the hunger and fury of a single man on a wind-swept steppe, and it swallowed the world. Then it was gone. Today the steppe is quiet. The great Khans are dust. But if you stand on that vast Mongolian grassland on a clear night, close your eyes and listen to the wind, you can almost hear the thunder of 100,000 hooves. History does not judge power. It only records it. The Mongols built something no human being has matched before or since, and they built it from nothing. Whether that deserves admiration or horror is a question only you can answer. This has been Ages of War. We'll see you in the next war story.